Okay, welcome. This is the 5:30 start time for the Board of Mayor and Alderman work session for January 26, 2021. We're going to limit the physical access in this meeting room due to current limitations on public gatherings, and we've made accommodations to ensure that the public is able to participate. There's a number of ways that the public can participate. Franklin TV or the City of Franklin website, or they can watch the live stream through the City of Franklin Facebook and YouTube accounts. Here's a call-in number, 312-626-6799 with a meeting ID of 926-8611-5221 with a passcode of 630254. Callers will be unmuted, given an opportunity to comment during the meeting at specific times. There is limited viewing here in the City Hall with the TV out in the hall. The public may also email comments and questions prior to 3:30 p.m. on the day of the meeting to the recorder at franklintn.gov to be read aloud. Live comments and those submitted by email will be limited to 2 minutes. Here's some ways you can connect. www.youtube.com/user/City of Franklin, or Facebook, www.facebook.com/City of Franklin, or the City of Franklin website, franklintn.gov/Franklin TV. This meeting is called to order, and now we'll go through a roll call. Alderman Barnhill, are you present?
I see you, but don't hear you. I see him mouthing yes. Alderman Martin. Thank you, Alderman Barnhill.
Present.
Alderman Speedy.
Present.
Vice Mayor Berger. I'll come back to her. Alderman Blanton.
Here.
Alderman Peterson.
Here.
Alderman McClendon.
I'm here.
And Vice Mayor, are you logged in?
I'm finally here. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, great. Welcome. Okay, we're now going to go to item number 1, which is a resolution 2020-281 declaring that the Board of Mayor and Alderman members shall meet on January 26, 2021 for work session and conduct its essential business by electronic means rather than being required to gather a quorum of the members physically present in the same location because it's necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of Tennesseans in light of the COVID-19 outbreak. I'd entertain a motion.
Move for approval.
Thank you, Alderman Martin. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Alderman Barnhill. Any discussion? Ready to vote? Alderman Barnhill.
Yes.
Alderman Martin.
Yes.
Alderman Speedy.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Berger.
Yes.
Alderman Blanton.
Yes.
Alderman Peterson.
Yes.
And Alderman McClendon.
Yes.
Thank you. It passes unanimously. We'll now go to citizen comments. I know we have some folks on the line here tonight. This is an opportunity for citizens to speak on items not on this agenda. And I'll welcome Jamon Daughtry, who is the chair of the Black Business Coalition. And can we let him in?
Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right, wonderful. So good evening, Mayor Moore and Franklin Board of Aldermen. My name is Jamon Daughtry, and on behalf of my co-chairs, we're grateful to be allotted just a few minutes to introduce the Williamson County Black Business Coalition to the leadership of the City of Franklin. So the Black Business Coalition falls under the umbrella of Williamson Inc.'s Inclusion and Diversity Initiative. The coalition exists to support Black business owners in Williamson County by providing them with networking opportunities, access to capital, minority contracting opportunities, professional development, and visibility. The coalition is co-chaired by 4 individuals. Tara Blue, who is the Executive Director of Community Child Care Centers here in Franklin. Robert Blair, who's the owner of B Media, and also the chair of the Franklin Special School District. Jeffrey Magruder, who is the Chief Relationship Officer at Citizens Savings and Trust Bank, and myself, an owner-operator of the Good Food Group, and we operate some McDonald's restaurants in Williamson County. In addition to us having deep roots here in Franklin and Williamson County, Tara and I also serve as board members on the Williamson Inc. board. And we're also blessed to have Jennifer Horn as a Black Business Coalition ally, and she serves as Managing Director of Urban Campus and Core, who we have been utilizing to promote our efforts. So thus far, the coalition has been supported by three very key individuals as well. So Matt Largen at Williamson Inc., who's been instrumental in the formation of the coalition. Our mayor, Dr. Moore, has been invaluable in providing thoughts on strategy and moving forward. And by Ellie Westman Chin, who's transitioning out of the state, but truly is bought in and invested in what we're trying to accomplish, what we're wanting to accomplish. So we're going to share our 2021 goals, and there are 5 of them. The first is to increase Black Business Chamber membership by 10%. And I will ask the facilitator if you could please share the one-pager at this time. That would be great. The second is to host 4 networking events. The third is to host 3 professional development occasions. We'd like to establish deliberate funding strategies with Williamson Inc. financial partners. And we'd like to allocate a percentage of all new construction projects to Black business contractors and vendors. So step 1 in accomplishing those goals is to understand the true composition of our audience. How many Black-owned businesses are represented in Williamson County? What are their products and services? Who are their customers? And most importantly, what do they need in order to engage in and contribute to the economy of Williamson County? So step 1 will be achieved through the completion of a comprehensive survey, which will provide this data for us and enable us to identify, analyze, and provide actionable analytics for the Black-owned businesses within our county. The cost of this initial survey is $35,000, and we have secured commitments for over 50% of that amount already. And we're just beginning now to get the word out. So this body is quite literally the first group outside of those key individuals already mentioned that we're sharing this with. So if at this time you're asking yourself, how can you support our efforts? We would offer 3 things. First, yes, you can support financially. We are well on our way to obtaining the first portion of funds to complete the survey and really connect to the needs of Williamson County Black-owned businesses. Number 2, we would ask that you not stop there. Invite us to come and speak and share our purpose with the businesses and organizations that you know have a diversity and inclusion commitment. They have budgets for causes like ours because they know that healthy, diverse businesses attract a wider range of consumers and travelers and dollars into our local economy. And lastly, please endorse our efforts within your spheres of influence. We'll leave our one-pager so that when your friends and colleagues express interest or questions, they can reach out and contact Robert Blair for more information on how they can sponsor or contribute to our cause as well. And his information is there on the one-pager that we'll distribute and leave for the body. So thank you, Mr. Moore, for the time. Mr. Mayor, for the time on the agenda. Thank you, board and city administration, for your attention.
Jamon, is there a address to, if people want to donate, you have a good opportunity for a pretty good audience to let them have that information right now if you have it at your fingertips.
Sure. I will leave you the email address, and Williamson Inc., the donation will come to Williamson Inc., and they'll process it through Williamson Inc. But the email address for Robert Blair is mediablair2. So that's MEDIABLAIR, the number 2, @gmail.com. When you share your interest, we will email an invoice out to you from Williamson Inc., and it'll have the instructions on who to make the donation out to.
Very good. Any questions from the board or comments?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I have a question.
Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
Hey, Jamon, great to see you.
Very good to see you again.
Yeah. Hey, so when you were talking about increasing membership, one of your goals to increase membership, when they do join, will they also have a dual membership with Williamson Inc. as the larger body along with that?
Yes, that's correct. And that's the objective. We fully recognize the benefits of joining Williamson Inc. And participating at that level. So it's not exactly a dual membership. They will have membership in Williamson Inc.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for the information. Good seeing you.
Any other questions or comments?
Mayor,
Alderman Blanton.
I just applaud these efforts. I think that it builds unity within our community, and it definitely gives a voice to people who may have felt like they didn't have one before. So kudos to all of you all, to Matt and Williamson Inc. Good stuff happening in Franklin. And it's just a ripple effect of things that have been put in place that continue to just spread and grow and unify us. So Godspeed to all of you all, and you have my support.
Well, thank you so much for those kind words, and we agree wholeheartedly. Thank you.
Thank you for being here tonight, and we'll continue to move forward and look forward to supporting your efforts. So item 2 is an update to the impact fees collected by the Water Management Department for the connection to the city's water and sewer system.
Mr. Mayor, this is the first of a series of presentations we're going to do in this and upcoming work sessions as we look at a proposal to update our impact fees related to water and sewer. We've had some discussion over the years about them, but these fees themselves have not been adjusted in somewhere around 15 years. So it is important to look at. It is part of what we look at in supporting and having growth support its impact on our communities as it relates, in this case, to water and sewer infrastructure. So Michelle and her team has been working on that, and this will be sort of this will lay the groundwork for some discussions we'll have at upcoming meetings as we start to walk through what's involved in changing these fees or updating these fees, but also just refresh everybody's memory on their structure and how they work. So Michelle, take it away, and we'll be glad to do this, and then we'll have some future installments and take any questions you have along the way. So take it away, Michelle.
Okay. Well, good evening. This is a great way to start a work session. So Brian and I are going to tag team a little bit. So Brian's the assistant director, kind of how he's been instrumental in kind of developing some of the more the detailed methodology. So we'll go to the next slide. So just as kind of the overall agenda for the presentation, so we're going to talk about the background of where impact fees are right now. And then Eric mentioned the previous ordinance changes and how it's not been updated in a while. We're going to present to you the existing methodology, and then we're going to go through our proposed methodology with how we developed it and some example calculations. Not too much math, and then we'll do the conclusions of kind of why we're moving this direction, and then some of the next steps. So this is the first in a long series of fun items. So as you know, the current impact fees for the department for both water and sewer are based upon meter size. So our sewer is based off of your water consumption. Impact fees are developed based off of your water meter. So this is true for both city customers and then non-city residential and commercial as well. So just as kind of a background, I know we've gone over it a lot. So for a typical house is a 3/4 inch meter, and that water impact fee is a little over $2,000 plus the tap fee. And then that can vary whether there's a meter already there or whether we need to make a tap and set the meter. And then for sewer, it's a little over $3,500 with the tap fee. So whether there's a tap already in place or whether it's not in place, and as a department, we have to go and make the tap ourselves. So those are our current impact fees, and that's that are based off of a 3/4 inch meter. So obviously that fee elevates the larger diameter meter you go. So meter size isn't an equitable capture of the impacts to the system. So as we're talking about your water consumption, it's not calculating your wastewater flow that's received into the collection system and in our treatment facility, and then the level of required treatment that we have to do. So the impact fees, they haven't been increased or really evaluated for 13 years actually. The last ordinance was 2007 120, which is the next slide. Next slide. So this was the last time that they were really looked at. So in 2007, the access fee was changed from $1,400 to $2,100 for a residential meter. The system development fee remained the same. So, the system development is what we've defined previously as actually calculating the impact to the system. That remained the same. The installation fee has been $263, which is the same amount that it is right now. The installation fee for a tap not in place for sewer is $1,240, which is the same amount that it is right now. So, as you know, labor costs have gone up in over 13 years, so that's not an equitable recapture of those fees either. So in that ordinance, it also introduced the ability to recapture from the resident the additional work that was not covered in the installation fee. So if we ran into some unexpected conditions, so that became effective March 1st. In 2018, we put together an ordinance change that just combined the system development fee and the access fee into what we now call an impact fee. So that just kind of ease of terminology across the board. So this is a table that's outlining the water and sewer impact fees based off of the meter size. So this is the existing methodology that we have. So as you can see, there is a vast cost difference the larger meter you go. So the current methodology that we have incentivizes the installation of an undersized meter rather than actually the water usage determined from actual occupancy. We've seen that, we have seen that in instances historically where, there might be a smaller meter put in to kind of offset some of those larger impact fees. It also discourages the use of fire suppression systems, which may require a larger meter too. So the question really lies is how do we accurately predict the impact to the system? So, as you know, we have increased maintenance costs with our system. We have with increased line sizes from capacity related projects. We have increased treatment costs, all the cost of electricity, the cost of purchasing chemicals. I mean, as you know, from when we talked about the new Southeast wastewater capacity, there's our permit limits for treating that is becoming more stringent. So we're having to add additional processes and additional treatment technologies to get down to that level that TDEC is requiring us to get down to. So that needs to go into the calculation too. So next slide. Okay, so how do we accurately predict the wastewater loading to the system? So we're only going to talk about sewer because that's kind of where more of the loading enters our system. So we're proposing a structure change based off of a single family unit equivalent. And that is, okay, there we go. So single family unit equivalent is, it's a standard industry standard, a capacity sizing that there's we use in a lot of different capacity calculations. So this provides an equitable assessment of fees based on the projected demands by the developer as verified through city staff. So that these fees are tied to the projected demands that drive our capital investments and planning. This encourages meter sizing based on demands, eliminates the meter sizing based on decisions of fees. So no undersizing at this point. And then obviously encourages the use of fire suppression systems. So the single family unit equivalent, an SFUE, is 350 gallons per day. I talked about it's an industry standard that is used for a lot of sizing, for a lot of development projects. It's how we calculate a lot of capacities. One single family unit is one residential house. And then if we have commercial buildings or if we have, multifamily buildings, they could be multiples of SFUEs. So we could, in some of the calculations that we'll go into, we'll actually see how that can vary versus different building uses. So next slide. Okay, so now to the actual, methodology. So what we started with was we used the 2018 International Building Code to determine the actual occupancy of buildings. So this is the IBC has been adopted by our Building and Neighborhood Services for a lot of implementation of the codes. And so the actual occupancy is going to determine who and what would be contributing to the collection system in our treatment facility. So the next step is we selected various structure uses within the city for comparison. So, we selected a school, office buildings, residence, mercantile facilities, kind of in and out shops, those types of things. We reviewed water consumption. We compared it to the existing impacts that we've seen. We compared it to the occupancy loading. We took all that into account, and then we used those data points to determine the protocol for SFUE determination, which is going to give us a single number and take away the meter size methodology. So I'm going to let Brian go into the actual calculations, and then we'll kind of wrap that up with the conclusions.
As Michelle mentioned, the proposed SFUE methodology is based on information that will be received from the applicant to the Water Management Department during the availability process. And there are two parameters that we have to have in an availability application, and that is the proposed square footage of the structure the applicant wants to build and the occupancy group class that building will have. After that is derived, those are derived from the 2018 International Building Code as noted, and that is the adopted building code by the City of Franklin. These occupancy use groups have assigned occupancy load factors and demand factors, and these values were based on industry standards and also sites that we have reviewed to massage or adjust them accordingly that fits what we are seeing in the field. The base calculation will be the building square footage divided by the OLF number and then multiplied by the demand factor, which equals the total demand. The total demand is then divided by 350 gallons per day, and that gives you the number of SFUEs for that particular project. Okay, next slide. As mentioned previously, the table on this slide is the description of the occupancy groups, along with the occupancy load factors and the demand factors for those groups. Again, these values were based from ranges established from industry standards, reviewing the International Building Code, and what has been observed and reviewed by our department. Next slide. So this is our first example of an actual facility that was built in Franklin, and it consisted of a business occupancy group of 2,000 square feet and 5 residential units. So when you apply the methodology as described, this particular development would have an impact fee based off 6.43 single family unit equivalents.
So Brian, I'm just going to jump in for a minute. So that yellow column is information that would be provided to us by the developer. And then those two blue columns are standard values that we would pull from.
Correct. The next slide. This is our example number 2, and this was an educational facility. consists of 183,020 square feet. Applying the occupancy load factors and demand factors to this occupancy group, this particular development would have a 28.14 single-family unit equivalent demand on the system. Okay, next slide. And the third example that we are showing, this is another facility built in Franklin, and it consisted of 2 stories, 20,377 square foot per story, with one floor being a mercantile occupancy group, the second floor being a business occupancy group. Again, applying the occupancy load factors to those uses, along with the demand factor, it equated to a 28.14 SFUE demand on the system. And if I'm not mistaken, the previous slide, I think there's a typo on it. I think it was actually higher. So it just got carried over to this slide, so I apologize about that. It should have been, I think, 43.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So our point here is to note in all the examples, the proposed building square footages and applying its use groups will give a more equitable calculation on impact and the methodology water management recommends for implementation and granting availabilities and connection approvals.
Okay, so we'll do the next slide and then, so as we kind of talked about so this presentation was really just the methodology from moving toward a meter size to an SFUE calculation, where it's not, so basing the impact to the system off of a meter size isn't an equitable capture of the impacts to the system. It's not, it's the water consumption is not determining the wastewater flow and the level of treatment that's going to be needed to treat some of those contaminants. We have the increased maintenance cost, the increased treatment cost, more stringent permit limits are requiring us to be a better, efficient facility, to treat better, to convey better. And that's what this change to the impact fee will cause. The occupancy load factor will calculate the water and sewer contribution based upon the use of the building, taking into account varied uses. These standard factors allow for consistent usage across all types of structures, while giving us some discretion to modify those based off of the usage. So when we looked at that standard values, there was some building uses that we added to kind of allude more to that occupancy table to adapt it to the city of the community that we live in, knowing the type of businesses that we have, knowing the type of industries that we have, and kind of and using that to develop a table that fits us a little bit better. So we'll go to the next slide. So as we kind of talked about in the beginning, the next steps are, so we had this presentation where we talked about the methodology, and we'll take questions in a minute. The February 9th work session is where we'll then have another presentation, and we'll actually present the cost and how this is the impacts to the system. And then based off of that, we'll then present the subsequent ordinance changes and then the readings that we have. Our goal is to have this implemented July 1st. So that should give us enough time, if we need to bring this back or, have a little bit more discussion on this. So with that, is there any questions that anyone has? I know that was a lot to go through fairly quickly.
Mr. Mayor.
Questions? Go ahead, Alderman Peterson.
Well, I was going to say, the comment was there's not much math in it. I think I'm a numbers person, and when I read through all of this, and even today, I still went, what? I'm still not sure I understand, the point. And maybe I'll learn more in February.
Well, so the International Building Code defines buildings based off of the occupancy. So kind of understanding that an office building is going to have a different impact than a car wash, is going to have a different impact than a restaurant. And so using those occupancy classes is going to help us better define the usage that comes into our system, the loading. When we say loading, the wastewater that comes into our system. So rather than assuming that all wastewater is created equal, there's going to be some that's more impactful than others.
I did get that, especially whenever you were talking about today. Really, it has more to do with the wastewater, or the result of the types of wastewater that are coming.
Right.
If I may, I guess one of the key elements here is, and it's been mentioned a handful of times, is equity, and the equity applies both ways. And as you know, we use the meter size to define what those fees currently are. In instances where a meter, for whatever reason, gets undersized, the impact, the fees that we get based on that impact of the system are under realized. And then, so we don't receive the fees adequate to cover what the true impact is. And then on the flip side, of course, if you have a commercial development that comes in and for whatever reason, their meter size requirements forces them to go to a 4-inch meter when, it's not quite, and the demands are just over that of what a 3 can handle, then the developer is paying this fee beyond what their impact would be. So the idea would be to hone in on what that impact is based on that single family unit, which gives you it's a more refined number versus the incremental increases that you see with meters. So the idea would be is that, that the approach would be more equitable to both developer and city. And the International Building Code is a great place to start, considering it's used in building and neighborhood services. And really that's kind of the starting point in which we evaluate how an individual project is going to impact our water and sewer system. So hope that helps.
Nice explanation. Alderman Martin.
I don't want you to go into great detail about this because I won't understand it anymore than just to tell me in a few words. But if a person comes in with a restaurant, do you have a set amount for that restaurant? Some might have 3 workers and some might have 30 workers. If a person comes in with a small restaurant and increases the number, do you ever change that? Do you ever change their cost?
Their impact fee would remain the same based off of the size of the restaurant.
You mean the
Square footage of the restaurant.
Yeah, the square footage of the restaurant. Yeah. So if they were to kind of, relocate or to a bigger building, then that's when it would come in. That's when it would come into play.
Thank you.
If I may, because Alderman Martin asked a very good question, that if we have existing buildings in our community and those uses in those buildings paid an impact fee. They paid likely a road impact fee and a sewer and water fee to connect to the system. So anytime a use changes, if the use is causing more demand, then we would charge the incremental difference between what was originally paid and the increased demand. And the best example that I can probably give you to illustrate this would be if there was an insurance office in a building or a tenant space and they moved out and a restaurant moved in, the use demand would be greater. So we would charge the incremental difference between the office and the increased demand created by the restaurant because there would be more demand on the system.
Thank you.
And is that done during the permit process or when is that done?
It is during the permitting process, yes. And we do that presently for increased demand for road impact fees on change of uses.
That's also done in water and sanitary sewer. However, if it doesn't require an increased meter size, then that impact, we can't capture any fees because of that impact due to the fact that there's not a meter size change.
Mayor, if I may offer one more antidote that I believe highlights the importance of this change.
Please go ahead, Mr. Kerr.
I believe we all understand that infrastructure is very expensive. It's very expensive to install, and it's very expensive to maintain. And what we're trying to do here is to, as Michelle, Brian, and Mark shared, is to accurately calculate the demands of our system and to have development pay its proportionate share. This will allow us to more accurately measure the impacts on our system and assign the appropriate fees. And as we continue to talk about land uses and density that equates to sizing the infrastructure, this type of model is critical. So we're going to have more discussions on it, but I did want to share that from a broader planning and land use and infrastructure perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. We ready to move on? Item 3 is deny sewer availability for 605 Ellington Drive.
So this one is the homeowner is requesting a denial, and we are recommending a denial. This is their house is next to the 5 Mile Creek interceptor. Their residence is on the west side of the creek, and the 5 Mile interceptor is on the east side of the creek. This would require them creating a tap underneath the creek and setting a clean out. There hasn't been a tap that was set for them during the construction of that interceptor. They're requesting denial just to reconfigure their plat with the Williamson County, the assessor's office. I guess there was a bathroom structure that was placed in their barn that wasn't accounted for, and they want to properly document that.
Any questions?
What do you do about that? What do you do about when they add something and they didn't have permission?
Well, this residence is in the county, and so I think that it was, from what I understand, it wasn't added the appropriate way. So we probably should have been petitioned for availability, or the county should have at that time. So because that bathroom structure is already there, the homeowner is just asking for us to deny so they can record the plat appropriately with the Register of Deeds.
Item 4, Resolution 2021-05, a resolution to authorize the Planning and Parks Department to submit 2 applications to the State Historic Preservation Office for Historic Preservation Fund grants to be used for historic resources documentation for Lewisburg Avenue Historic District and for restoration work at City and Rest Haven cemeteries.
Thank you, Mayor. The president planner is on here representing the planning department, but we're here before you. This particular item is also on the voting session tonight. The grants were released in December, and so we were notified, and we are requesting to apply for 2 grants. One would be through the planning department. The other would be through parks through the State Historical Preservation Office. We'll cover these funds under the general fund, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
I have a question.
Please.
Alderman Blanton, please.
So I get, sorry, I can't remember the 2 different things. I get the Rest Haven. That makes sense to me. I don't understand what we're identifying with Lewisburg Avenue. And I mean, at first I thought, well, that's going to be sorry, foggy brain. The DAR property they wanted to help me. What is that?
Collins Farm.
Yes, not that. But then I realized that wasn't it at all. So what is the reason for wanting the historic preservation funds for Lewisburg Avenue? That's my question.
I'm happy to answer that, Alderman Blanton. I appreciate the question.
Thank you, Amanda.
The planning department tries to maintain a healthy and up-to-date historic resources inventory. It's required by the state of Tennessee, and it's very important for our staff, our historic zoning commission, our planning commission, our board of mayor and aldermen, our community at large to have the most up-to-date information available about our historic resources. The National Register nomination is the basis by which we create a lot of our local historic districts, and the Lewisburg Avenue National Register nomination was prepared and listed in 1988. So it has not been updated since that time. The planning department has worked incrementally over the last several years to update several of our National Register nominations, the most recent being Hensheyville Historic District, and prior to that, the Downtown Franklin Historic District. So this is just part of a healthy preservation plan for our community. It will not change the boundaries of our local Lewisburg Avenue Historic District, but it will ensure that the documentation is available to anyone who wants it, and it will more than likely shape any future preservation planning efforts and any future changes to our historic district design guidelines.
So it's not identifying a particular property, it's identifying a district, if you will, that maybe some, if not all, of those properties are National Register. Is that correct?
They're already listed as contributing or non-contributing structures to that Lewisburg Avenue Historic District. This is just updating the documentation so that it is up to date from 1988. So it's actually reflective of the true conditions. There's been a lot of, building additions,
sure.
Infill. We want to keep a keen eye on our accessory structures because they are threatened by development pressure pretty often. So it's just a way to maintain our resource inventory. We have had, unfortunately, a few fires as of late, and so it's very important to maintain that documentation for prosperity.
Okay, I guess my concern, and then I'll be quiet, I just didn't want to see another historic district be created unbeknownst to the residents where they were. I hear you, Eric. That's what I'm saying. I was just making sure that they're not going to have to go before historic zoning to do any upgrades or changes on their home as you would in Hensheyville or other historic areas.
Oh, no. If that were to be proposed, it would certainly be a very public process with rezoning.
Okay. I'm just making sure that's not the ball we're rolling down the street. So
thank you very much for asking.
Ready to move on? Item 5. Ordinance 2020-33, an ordinance to amend Title 21 of the City of Franklin Municipal Code to create a new Chapter 7, authorizing incentives for the construction of low and moderate income housing within the City of Franklin, Tennessee.
Vernon, do you want to take the lead on this?
Yeah.
This is a topic we've had some discussion on, but we're bringing it forward in a more formal structure here in terms of adjusting our ordinance to provide for this incentive structure. So go ahead, Vernon.
Thank you, Mayor and Eric. A few weeks back, David Pear from the Williamson County Board of Realtors, Kel McDowell from Williamson Inc., John Besser from our Housing Commission, Kathleen, Tom Marsh, and myself spent some time talking about the ordinance that's before you this evening. And Kathleen and I will be available to answer questions after I share 4 points that were discussed in our conversation. And I know Kel is watching on live stream, and I don't know if John or David were able to join us this evening. But first and foremost, that this is one of many tools that are used to create affordable housing and ultimately housing diversity. It's an equity type of tool, and to state it simply is that if a family whose income is 80% or less of the median income in the greater Nashville metropolitan statistical area. And they aren't currently able to afford or rent a property, that this gives them the opportunity, hopefully, to purchase a home and build equity. The appreciation is limited because the resale is deed restricted to the future family that would have a similar income of 80% or below of the median income of the area. But they would get that incremental appreciation. And I know Kathleen has shared some of that, what that might look like. But it is an equity-based affordable housing tool. This ordinance does address the request from the Franklin Housing Authority and what we've seen from Community Housing Partnership for multifamily dwellings that essentially are using tax credits, that it does provide an incentive that help them achieve that reality. But the most important thing that we had talked about was that it's incumbent upon us to come back in a year, in 2 years, and thereafter to see if the ordinance is achieving the desired result of creating affordable dwellings. If it's not, then we should be open to looking at it and seeing why it's not creating the desired result. So I'll leave it at that. Kathleen and I are available for questions. Bill Squires from our law department has helped us craft the ordinance in the shape as it is, and we thank him for that. And we believe that it'll be a good start to affordable housing and hopefully encourage private development to become involved. Thank you.
Vernon, real quick, you or Kathleen, if you could summarize the structure. What the dollar amounts tie to, how it gets paid and then reimbursed or paid back to, and then just walk through that real quickly for everybody.
Sure. The ordinance, and you'll see on the agenda on the voting meeting tonight that we, if a entity, could be private, a not-for-profit, is wanting to provide affordable dwellings, whether they're owner-occupied dwellings or rental dwellings, they would request permission to participate. And via resolution, we would approach the board, and the board has the option of granting up to the equivalent of the development impact fees that would be available for that project. They're not obligated, but that is the metric that we've used. The resolution then allows us to work with the entity to forecast or estimate when they will deliver those units, meaning they'll be ready for occupancy, at which time that entity will be able to request payment of that incentive. And that resolution then allows us to budget those monies accordingly in anticipation of that request. Does that help, Eric?
Yeah, that's very helpful. I just want to make sure we were clarifying that connection and that really the payment happens on the back end when the units are delivered in terms of the developer getting that benefit. And it does tie to those up to the amount of the road and parkland impact fees.
Correct.
And basically, this codifies what we've already done twice with the Franklin Housing Authority. Would that be an adequate description?
Very similar, yes.
Yeah. Alderman, Vice Mayor, did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, so Vernon, to try to summarize some of that, well, in here it says reduce barriers for safe and decent housing to low and moderate income families. So reducing the barriers, I'm taking it from what I've read through here, and what I hear you saying is the barriers are basically all monetary. Because what we're doing is we're granting the equivalent back to them in the fees, the payment of the of the incentive. So it's basically, are there any other barriers besides monetary barriers that we're working with here, or are there other barriers that we're talking about that I've missed?
Well, thank you, Vice Mayor. With this particular ordinance and tool, one of the barrier is development fees.
Right.
Now, I hesitate and offer at a different time that Kathleen and the Housing Commission, we can talk about the other barriers that a place like Franklin creates for workforce and affordable housing. But in this case, the ordinance addresses the barrier of development fees, essentially road impact and parkland. I will also add that we do have other ordinances that help provide sewer and water to affordable units already in place.
Yeah.
So, you know, we hope to move on from the development impact fees and that you've highlighted here. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that helps a little bit. Plus, you brought up the sewer, the sewer, water and sewer. That's a good point, because there's some barriers that we can't remove. I mean, like the high cost of land. I don't know what we do about that. We don't have it within our power to remove the high cost of land. That's a barrier that we really can't deal with in this ordinance. But the sewer and the water, thank you for bringing that up too. I forgot about that. So we do have things in place already there.
Alderman Martin.
Thanks.
This morning, I spoke with Eric about the email he sent to make some clarifications about this. There is something I really am not sure about. I don't think this means what I think it means, but down in the sale of one of these units or one of these homes, it says the seller, whenever the unit is sold, the seller is also responsible to verify that the buyer is an eligible buyer. About the income, you don't mean the homeowner, do you, Eric?
If I may, Alderman Berger, I'll try to respond. The owner of a dwelling in a deed that has a deed restriction, when they sell that, they have to obtain a title report. And the title company in that transaction will see that there's a deed restriction. And through the transaction there, they will ensure that the new buyer falls within that 80% income range, or the new family that's going to purchase the home.
But should that be the sellers? I mean, I don't know that they're going to know what that means.
And that's why we have somebody like Kathleen and our team to help with that.
Fine, it's going to be
yes. And that's not uncommon, that the jurisdiction or the entity helps monitor that those deed restrictions are being honored. But title companies have an obligation to follow through on that, whether they do or not.
I've had a title company and I understand that, but I do know that many times the seller, if you put it all on the seller, he won't always know and get the information. So, you know, you rely on your title company and you rely on the research that's done on that title. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Alderman Bland.
I'm just thrilled about this opportunity, and I appreciate everybody involved for doing the due diligence it took to make it come to fruition. I know that in any survey we would take, whether it's, you know, our own or Franklin Tomorrow, affordable housing has always been identified as one of our biggest hurdles, and we know that full well. I think to Bev's comment, the way I see this is, yes, our land is our big hurdle to cross because we have such valuable property, and that inhibits or prohibits the idea of affordable housing. And as a municipality and government, it's not our job to actually do housing. That's, the state and federal government. But the way I see this is we're doing our part to open the doors to make this happen. And by decreasing the responsibility of the developer or builder, we're allowing them to realize the cost savings that we hope they pass on to that homeowner. It's kind of like we're partnering with them and giving the ability to make this happen. And so I think I'm glad that we're putting this opportunity out there, and I hope that I have said it for 11 years now. I think affordable housing comes down to the heart of the builder. And I think what we're doing right now is putting our heart in the game, and it's time to see who also does that. So thank you so much.
Well, I would congratulate this board on the steps that they've done to make this a reality, and the fact that there are already 2 projects that have fallen in this area. I think part of the idea is, at least when we've dealt with the Franklin Housing Authority, is they're able to then market that property to someone that will be able to get tax credits. And so, anyway, any other questions? We'll move on to item 6, which is a contract 2020-0340 with Alfred Benesch and Company for the East McEwen Drive Phase 5 project at an amount not to exceed $570,543.91.
So this contract, we sat down with Brentwood and looked at the design of McEwen Phase 5. In doing so, we've realized how much change has actually happened out there. And we revised our agreement to the timing associated with when these improvements would need to be done. And the change that's occurred out there is, Breezeway's developed out, Traditions, Morgan Farms, and Terramore subdivisions all built out. We've done improvements to Wilson Pike and East McEwen Drive. And there have been changes also with the transmission, the Columbia Gas transmission lines out there and their requirements associated with construction. And so therefore the design that we did back in 2010, unfortunately, is outdated. What this professional services agreement is going to allow us to do is go back and update the design. We're going to have to look at multiple options on how to cross the gas lines and how we can, and what those different options cost and the requirements associated with that. And also we're going to have to look at some walls to avoid major impacts to some of the subdivisions that have been built out in that area since 2010. And so city staff sat down with Brentwood engineering team, and we've mutually agreed on a scope and a consultant based on past performance and history and their ability to get this work completed. We felt that Alfred Benesch was the best company to move forward with to help both jurisdictions get this project done. And if you'll remember with the agreement, Brentwood's actually looking at doing a slightly longer extension where our responsibility ends at the city of Franklin limits, but Brentwood wanted to look at extending that road to the next subdivision down. And so we're going to contract directly with Alfred Benesch. Brentwood was going to contract directly with Alfred Benesch for their section. However, for our section, the city of Franklin goes back to that agreement where Brentwood would be responsible for about 59.42% of the actual costs associated with this professional services agreement, and as well with the construction once we get to that point. So happy to answer any questions. We're looking forward to keeping this project moving forward.
One quick clarification, Mr. Holzen, is the $570,000, is that divided between us and Brentwood, or is that just our part?
That is divided between us and Brentwood. So Brentwood would be responsible for 59.42% of that actual cost.
Thanks for that clarification. Other questions from the board?
Paul, real quick, I got a question. So we already had the gas lines there. The gas lines haven't been moved, to my knowledge. The other thing is Breezeway was already there. I think that subdivision to the north is Traditions, so that's new. Morgan Farms, I don't know about that, but Terramore. So are we ditching all those design plans, or we're just adding to them? Because it seems to me, as I said, Breezeway was there, the gas lines were already there. I think Traditions and Morgan Farms are the only two new ones.
So we're not that's a very good question. We're not ditching the design plans altogether. Some of the residential lots that back up to McEwen, we would be very intrusive into their property based on the design plans and how those developed out. And therefore, we've got to look at adding a few walls to, otherwise we'd be taking up entire backyards with slope easements. It just would not be acceptable at all, in my opinion. The other big change that happened is the requirements associated with the Columbia Gulf transmission main. Originally back in 2010, we separated the roadway crossing them because that was an easier permitting method and process that would avoid us from having to upgrade all the gas lines. Well, the story we're getting now from Columbia Gulf is we have to upgrade the entire gas line crossing there, which is extremely expensive. It's still within the budget that we set forward with the CIPs. We put a pretty conservative number in there, luckily, so I don't think that number's increasing that we had in the CIP. However, the requirements have changed. We need to look at reducing it down. And what we've talked about with Brentwood to keep the cost down is we're going to look at two options, one with a median divided and another one where we take the 4 lanes and bring them in and almost go to a 4-lane section and tighten it up and then work with Columbia Gulf to see what is the cost savings and what are our options there. Ultimately, we'll bring those decisions back to our city managers and more than likely the board to evaluate. However, those are some of the big changes. So a lot of this cost is we're going to keep the majority of the design, but we have to look at how we cross those gas lines and then the retaining walls and how we design all those retaining walls, which sparked us having to do geotechnical borings every 50 feet and retaining wall designs, which starts to get extremely expensive as well. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, and I would say that I would hope that we would look at bringing those roadways lanes in further. Forget the median if we have to, because that gets really costly on you have to upgrade those gas lines. I think it's a take and give, and if that's the cost of it, get rid of the median.
And we would just get rid of the median in that one small section, but we want to evaluate both and get it over to Columbia Gas to evaluate the costs associated with that.
Thanks, Paul.
Ready to move to the next item, which is City of Franklin Contract 2021-0001 with Geotech Engineering Company for geotechnical services related to the new City Hall project.
I can speak to this, and Vernon, please chime in if you'd like to. This is related to the City Hall. Well, we entered into an agreement with OHM Advisors for the design of City Hall. It did not include the geotechnical services. We have historically worked with Geotech Engineering Company, and this would allow us to do the necessary drilling, I believe, for our structural engineer. But Vernon's on, and he's had much more involvement than me in this project. Did I miss anything, Vernon?
Yes, thank you, Paul. That's exactly it. We did not include some of the initial environmental work, and this is essentially to do some boring so we have an understanding of what's under the ground in terms of the type of soils, what it will support, and then also water table. So it's not that large of a contract, and we've decided to enlist the assistance of this firm since they've proven to be very diligent and conscientious in some previous work, and it's likely we will want to use them in the future as we get into more design of the City Hall. But this provides some initial soil tests, essentially. Thank you.
Hey, when I've got a question. When they did the parking garage, So I'm sure they did a geotechnical study for the parking garage. Is that available to them also? Will they be perusing that or studying that as well to know what was actually under that area?
Well, we're assembling all the information. I can't speak directly if we still have that environmental report available. What we are looking at is we have to get under and around the existing city hall. And that's where these borings will take place. But I will definitely check with our team and we can pull that up because we're trying to provide as much information to the consultant as possible.
Yeah, I just bring that up because I would think that they'd want to at least have that information to look at. Thanks.
Okay. Go ahead, Alderman Barnhill.
Vernon, one other comment. I know when they built the bank building over here across from us, they had some water issues in the basement, and I think they stayed there for quite some time. So we certainly want to be aware of any water table issues or anything else under this piece of property. I'm sure we did not go as deep. They did not dig as deep to build this mall area as they did to go into a basement at the bank, what used to be First Tennessee Bank. But certainly that was an issue years ago.
And we've heard about that. And again, this is some very preliminary due diligence that we need to have this information going forward. Thank you.
Okay, item 8, which is a draft City of Franklin contract 2021-0005, professional services agreement with Windrow Phillips Group to provide lobbying and advisory services on behalf of the City of Franklin.
For the past few years, we have worked along with 10 other cities across the state with Windrow Phillips to represent us on legislative matters, assist us also with some regulatory issues that may come up. And this is a continuation of that arrangement. Brentwood and, like I said, about 8 other cities around our same size that also have professional city managers, city administrators have sort of used this service together, and it's helped us understand and participate effectively in the legislative process. Shauna and her team works on this in terms of tracking legislation, and they're a great resource for them. So I'll let Shauna touch on anything else related to this arrangement.
I think you hit it pretty well, Eric. The only other thing that I would bring up, there is a slight increase in the cost this year, but we're finding that the service that we're using through Ms. Windrow's office is year round now, especially this past year because we had so many executive orders and they were also helping us track those. So it's becoming more of a year round arrangement rather than 9 months or 6 months.
And I believe because of that extension, we spent a similar amount to this past 12-month period because we used them a little more extended period of time because of those other complications, which you never know for sure what's going to occur in any given session or any given year, but it is valuable, a valuable resource to us.
Mayor, real quick, because would it be worth maybe having them come in once a year to give a 5 to 10 minute overview? I think that would be something the citizens might enjoy hearing. Hey, here's what's going on at the state level that we're advocating for the city of Franklin on.
Yeah, we certainly can do that. And they're a great resource. In fact, tomorrow they're going to assist us with a meeting that we do typically before the legislative session starts with our local legislative delegation, just to open up, make sure there's good lines of communication leading into the session and then throughout the session. But we'd be glad to have them talk to you a little bit about what they're seeing and any answer any questions you might have. We'd be glad to set that up.
And I would also say, Eric, that since you're having that meeting tomorrow and you're doing it, it would be helpful to give the alderman an update on those things and just let us know that you are meeting and that, especially when when the legislature is in session, it'd be helpful for us to know that, hey, we were meeting with them and going through some items with our local elected officials for the state.
Yeah, be glad to do that. I mean, we do this as a kickoff, and then we're in kind of ongoing communications throughout the session, just as items go forward. And then Shauna and her group does a great job of just doing some ongoing tracking of items that could impact cities. And so there's a lot of different avenues, both also Tennessee Municipal League, Tennessee City Management Association, a lot of our other professional associations all have those connections too. So we do try to keep track of that, and we'll be glad to share information as we get it with you as well.
Yeah, and I know, Shauna, you've let the aldermen know sometimes when there's some issues that they're paying attention to. So it'd be helpful for us to know about that too.
Yeah, I've already started a list of bills that I'm following right now, but I think it goes both ways. So if you guys hear of a bill that you're concerned about or know about, I would love to know that as well, and I can track it for you. The benefit of tracking it is making sure I know that Anna and her group can be where they need to be, boots on the ground at the state capitol, to talk to people that we don't necessarily know about, but they know where to go and who to talk to.
Yeah, because if they can bring us information back and you can feed that to us too, then we can also engage them if this is a concern for the city. Thanks.
The other thing they help us do is differentiate what legislation really has some traction and which ones don't, because there are literally thousands of pieces of legislation that are filed and titles that are filed, and sometimes they may sound dramatic or scary even, and a lot of times they're just not going anywhere. And then there are others that you may not hear that much about that all of a sudden get a lot of momentum behind them. So they really help us differentiate, because it's hard to keep track of so many pieces that are flying around and track what potentially could impact us.
Yeah, that's very true.
I do have one public comment that I failed to recognize, and I'll let Angie read that into the record.
Okay, this was for item number 4. It's from the Heritage Foundation. The Heritage Foundation of Williamson County is sending this letter of support on behalf of the City of Franklin's Federal Preservation Grant application for an update to the Lewisburg Avenue National Register listing documentation. The preservation of Franklin's historic resources is the reason our organization was founded more than 50 years ago, and it continues to motivate our work. Not only does historic preservation make economic sense, as evidenced by our thriving historic downtown and thoughtful land use planning, but it increases our quality of life by reminding the community of the importance of what came before us and bringing neighbors together to preserve and learn from it. Preserving our historic resources doesn't just happen, it is intentional and difficult work, but the reward comes with the celebration of those places and stories that make our county unique. This letter represents the Heritage Foundation's support of the proposed update to the Lewisburg Avenue Historic District's National Register listing documentation. And it's from Barry Beasley.
Okay. We'll see you back at 7 o'clock for the regular board meeting of the mayor and alderman, and see you then.